Sure. I guess well, let me talk a little bit about um dollar dominance. So prior to World War One, we lived in a pound dominant world. So the British pound was the global currency. And World War One bankrupt England, and the US came out much stronger. And the center of the financial universe, I mean, England was a creditor country um, prior to World War One, and ended up being a debtor nation after World War One. And the center of the financial universe moved from London to New York, and contracts started to be written in dollars, and the U.S. dollar became the global currency and sort of cemented that position immediately after World War II at Bretton Woods. And so I don't think it's an accident that when you think about World War One and World War II, it created a big structural shift in uh, in finance, particularly moving away from the pound and toward the dollar. And so now, a huge number of contracts are, globally are written in dollars. A lot of international trade is written in dollars, and the dollar is seen as the leading reserve asset. And the question is, could COVID be sort of the moment that where you start to lose dollar dominance and we create some alternative? Is it a paradigm shift in finance that would move the globe away from the dollar? And I guess let me say that I think I'm skeptical uh, for that, because I don't see who would be the alternative
Right.
asset. I think Europe with the euro would like to be that alternative, and I think the euro will always be a major currency and always be a bit of a challenger to the U.S. dollar, but they're in the same boat that the U.S. is in many ways. The same issues that are facing the U.S. also face Europe, and given their sort of fiscal and monetary structures, in many ways, their situation's even more complex than the U.S. And then I look at places like China and India and Brazil and say, could they provide a competitive alternative to the U.S. dollar? And I come to the answer that no, given that if you want to be a global currency, what you need is for people to hold your currency for no other reason but to carry out transactions, which means in order to get the currency, they need to sell. Like if a foreigner wants dollars, the way you get dollars is you sell US goods and take those dollars and then never spend them in the United States, but use them to carry out transactions outside the US. But that means that the US has to run a trade deficit. And that's I think, the main source of our large trade deficits in these last 20 years
But,
or the
but
last 50 years really, is a consequence of the dollar dominance. Um, and are China and India and Brazil willing to run trade deficits? And I think the answer is no.
don't you think it has also like it is really has something to do with the store of value?
Yes.
And it's really like very little to do with this payment scheme. Yeah, we can have all sorts of payment schemes. Like there might be swap lines to country
Mhm.
X from China, then I buy a lot of goods and in these kind of things from China. But it doesn't seem to me that the store of value story is going anywhere.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, the question will the U.S. be a good store of value if we're running 3 and 4 and 5% inflation? Um, we're not a very good store. It's not a very good store of value. Uh, you're losing value, and that's a transfer from foreigners to the United States. Um, uh, the question is, what are these swap lines denominated in? You gotta denominate them in some currency, um, and generally those things are denominated in dollars. I mean, most contracts are written in dollars. And could you? I mean, it's sort of a line that the U.S. dollar may not be great, but it's or the phrase is
Right.
it's the cleanest dirty shirt out there.
Relatively speaking, exactly. Okay.
Yeah. What else? There needs to be something else. I mean, and the question would be, would a government be willing to make the hard choices And would it be worth it to make the hard choice? I mean, there are consequences. I think the trade deficit is a consequence of our decision to be a dominant currency, and it has consequences. It creates winners in the United States, but it also creates losers in the U.S. And so, does someone else want to take on those costs and benefits? That's up to. I think it's easy to talk and say, "Oh yeah, we want to do that," blah blah blah. But it's.
I mean, it's definitely
it's
good for views and like these kind of pub discussions because there's always like some de-dollarization kind of like news coming out pretty much every year